The word crisis is often used to describe the state of education in Guyana. Look how many fail English and maths, one side says. But look how we top the Caribbean, says the other. The national newspapers show smiling faces of those who now make 16 subjects sound like the minimum any serious or ambitious student should attempt. Yes, but where are the 16,000 who cannot pass maths and English? The argument goes on and on. So, Plain Talk this evening brings together two individuals well placed to understand the problem and therefore capable of making suggestions and recommendations on the way forward. Ms. Onya is the Director of Secondary Division of the May School, one of the country's leading private schools. And Dr. Henry Jeffery, no stranger to this program, is a former Minister of Education. So, Ms. Dr. Jeffery, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you.
What was your reaction when you read the news of the CXC results last month?
Me?
Why not?
Not surprising. Not surprising at all. I mean, that's where we were for the most part.
Which part not surprising? The outstanding performances we...
No, the outstanding performances, performance with one person getting 20 or how many CXC, I mean, people have been trending towards this for a very long time. Individual parents actually press students to get to those levels. And they've been doing that for some time, whether or not the school system, with its limited resources, should be providing that kind of opportunity. In Jamaica, for instance, I think you cannot do more than 10 subjects in the public system. So I don't know, because resources are limited, maybe you need to focus more. So from that standpoint, yes, and let's congratulate the young lady for what she has achieved. In terms of the actual maths and English you started with, that's always been the trend. Guyana has always been, for the most part, at the bottom of the table. I've said this when I was minister. I've written about it in the press. It's there. And it's about that kind of a level.
This begs the question, what did you do about it?
No, what you can do about it is what maybe the better question. But the could have done about it. At one time, I think we made a spike in English and went really like 42% or some craziness. But it was just 10 points over and above what we had expected. But it was a spike. So the next years, people start saying, look where they went. Look, they're down from that umpteen percent they had now. But Guyana has always been at the bottom of the table in terms of the CXC outcomes.
Ms. Sam, your reaction to the result?
Again, as Mr. Jeffrey indicated, these trends are not uncommon. These are things we've been moving towards for many years. My personal reaction was to wonder whether these students have been as developed in other areas of their lives as they obviously have been for academics. That's usually a major concern for me when it comes to students, especially at the high school level.
But the contrast between the 16 subjects and the 16,000?
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's specific to the CSEC. I think we have the same problem with the grade 6 assessment and every other internal and external examination that Guyanese students face. You have those who are obviously catered to, as Mr. Jeffrey said, resources are pumped into them, but then the others go astray. And as a Guyanese people, we need to think about what becomes of them thereafter. These persons don't just disappear out of our society. They go on to become professionals, they go on to become parents, and the cycle is perpetuated.
If one tries to do any kind of analysis, is there enough information? I noticed individual schools, your own school, I think, did an advertisement. I saw some schools do that. Is there enough information to do a proper analysis of the results, for example, by schools, by region, by public sector, by private sector?
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, there is.
No, is it available to the public for us to engage in a meaningful discussion?
No. I mean, right now we say that Ghana is the lowest in the Caribbean, but we're outside of one or two things I've written and tried to pick up these stats from other Caribbean countries. That's not provided.
No, I'm talking about within Guyana.
No, you have
in terms
to
of assessing whether the private sector is doing better than the public
How
school.
long ago I've done that? My first year as minister, I've done that. And I've shown that essentially, and I have the numbers, that's why you say I work with papers. I have the numbers that I did since 2001 that show that private schools were doing better. But they were not only were they destroying the Guyana average, they were destroying the Caribbean average.
Distorting?
Destroying. I mean, doing so well, it's a destruction because
Yes.
Caribbean average would say in English would be 54. You have the private schools doing maids did some 85%. At that time, QC had 99%. Bishops had so. The private schools have been doing this for a very long time. It's not particularly.
Of course,
new.
Queens is a bit of an aberration. because
Yeah,
Queens is a
but
public
that's
school.
why I pointed first to the private school because you don't take all the bright children and put them there. Some of the people that are going there are people that maybe didn't even do well in their exams. Therefore, it demonstrates quite clearly that the children could pass with the right approach and the right resources.
I agree.
That's what that showed, because you have to do the analysis and say what's happening. But we are spending $300 to $400 per child in education, and the private school must be spending $1,000. Yes, so by definition, and the Caribbean average must be nearly $8,000 because Jamaica is spending $700 to $800. We are spending about $4,000.
Of course, spending power does commentate as well. It must commentate to some extent.
It's major important. It determines the kind of teachers you will have. Half of our teachers will leave. It determines that, first of all. Spending also determines the kind of facilities the students have at their disposal. But spending do other things. When a parents paying for that education, it demonstrates a certain amount of things, the interest they want to take in their children, the commitment, and there's a central thing in this education process, that you have to have the committed parents, committed school management, and remember, that's also what finance do, because when these people are running their private schools, they're doing it they have to do well to attract people. So they have better school management. If I were to put anything at the top of the level of the ladder in terms of it, I say school management. I've seen Mayor Passad doing it in Essequibo.
Ms. Sam, do you think the public, maybe you and with privileged access to persons, do you think we know how well, say, the schools in South Georgetown are doing versus the private schools?
We don't have access to that sort of information. However, as students enter our system, we can make our personal assessments based on where they're coming from. If they're coming from Christ Church, if they're coming from Queen's College, we can then decide where we think these children are, where we can take them from through our system.
How much would it be fair to say that the economic means of parents largely determine, and not only in Guyana but any country, determine how well a child will perform at school, so that the cycle then continues and in fact gets worse?
But you know the answer to that, Chris. Look who fell. You go to any university, who are the people that are going, the middle class people that are relatively well off? I mean, that's changing now, but in our time, perhaps certainly my time when I'm going to university, it was a concern for countries like England that here, these are middle class people go to university because they have the facilities, they have the money, they have the commitment, and all that sort of a thing. Yes, resources of tremendous importance to a system.
I'm taking not only resources given by the government, I'm talking about poverty from the supply side.
Yeah, of course.
Or the demand side, if you want.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, when you say middle class, you're saying those that are not middle class or relatively poor suffer. They suffer.
What more information would you like to see, Ms. Sam? for us to have a serious and objective analysis of the state of education in Guyana?
Well, I believe that the Ministry of Education would have a vast quantity of information that they could disperse at their discretion to schools, to stakeholders of different sorts. I don't believe that it's a lack of information. I just believe that it's a matter of access. And we at Mays would surely like to have access to that sort of information. We have had instances where we have asked for information specific to our school, and that has been difficult to get, if only to question, if only to review. And so the distribution of information is definitely a challenge.
How does that affect the action that can be taken?
It affects the action, particularly if you're asking for public participation.
Mm-hmm.
When people come to participate, they can't come with airy-fairy ideas in their head about what the education system would be and what it could be and what it used to be. They must come with some basic, as you said, numbers, facts, and what's going on. And therefore, insofar as you want people to participate, you have to give them, well, not all the information, so you can't throw it out there in the big book, but some systematic education and statistics, yeah. And you people, journalists and things, must ask for this information and ask for the information in a systematic way. Like as I said, we have the statistics. For instance, in 2001, first thing we did, because I said, if you want to ask yourself what are the problems the education system is facing, and therefore let's see where we can find this information. And the first place you went was to the schools that you feel were doing quite well. And 2001, for instance, the Caribbean in English 1 to 3 was doing 38.3%. Guyana was doing 23.1%. in English 1 to 3. QC was doing 89.2%. Bishops were doing 86.1%. Mays was doing 85.7%, and School of the Nations was doing 54.6%. Now, and I can tell you...
Which means, hold on, if you got a whole set in the 80s and close to 90,
yeah,
and the average is 20-something...
23.
You have a serious problem. You have single digits in some cases.
Definitely.
What I'm saying to you essentially is, but when I looked at that, it showed me quite clearly, and I can do the same thing for English, but it showed me that all these children really can pass this subject. I mean, if you really had the resources and the thing, all of them, I mean...
But is that correct, though?
Yeah.
Because not every child, I mean, every child had an option to they do a common exam to get into Queens. It's only the cream, part of our system. It takes the very top and puts a lot of resources at their disposal.
Yeah, but remember, I'm not talking about Queens. I'm talking about a Mays and School of the Nation, and look what they're doing. English, I gave you just now. The Caribbean average was 53.7. Guyana was 34.5. Queens was 99.2. Bishop was 96.8. Mays was 65.5, and School of the Nation was 77.8 in terms of 1 to 3.
Yeah.
So which is
what is considered pathway.
Exactly. What it tells you then, or suggests, is that most of these children can pass the exam. Now, with proper
I don't know. Do you agree with that, most of the students? Because you've got students with different ability.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that factors in greatly for us is, in addition to resources, what you might want to call courage. At Mays, for example, right now, in terms of the systems that you put in place, we have this same issue. As of last year, we would have had all of our students from forms 3 to 5 streamed into science and business. But what we found is that within those streams, you again have those who make the 80s and 90s and those who are hanging around the 50s. And we had to make a decision to split those children according to their abilities. Now, this is contrary to the usual process in Guyana, and so it's a fight. It's a fight with the children, it's a fight with the parents, but you as a school or in the case of the ministry, as officials, you have to think of these ways of improving the children's performances, and you have to be courageous enough to follow through, whether they write it in the newspapers, whether they come as irate parents to your offices. You have to fight for the children. And I think that's a little harder to do in the public system. Thankfully, in the private system, we have that much more leeway. And if you are fortunate enough to be in an institution with strong leadership, visionary leadership, then these things become normal. And you see the results at the end of the day.
What's the distinction between the private sector leadership in education and the public sector leadership?
Well, I've never been in public sector leadership. For one thing, I'm quite
You have
sure.
some anecdotal,
I am
probably
sure I have
empirical
some.
evidence as well.
I am sure. I think that the public sector leadership is very regulated. I'm sure that at my age, I would not be a head teacher in a public school. So the private system allows, because it has that much more access to resources, it allows for more variation in its management system. It allows for more creativity. And so I think you are more likely, because we are dealing with children, as you said, children who learn very differently. And so we are more likely to stumble upon, I think, creative ways of dealing with the tutorship of children, dealing with educating them, disciplining them, any number of things. We have that much more leeway, which if you use it positively, I'm sure can bring better results.
As I said before, I believe that at the end of the day, private schools have a bottom line, and public schools do not have bottom line.
Are they more results oriented as well?
But they must, if they don't do well, they might have to close down and go away. So they are driven, just like a government department and a private business. They are driven towards success. They have a bottom line. They can close down. Their school can be ruined by bad results over time. And I think that is an important aspect of that. Now, perhaps now you have to say, well, you have a public system. How do you do things like that? And that's why you ask for that schools should have school improvement plans, that teachers must stick to, that you must have more local control so that they can know what's going on in the school and things like that, so that you can force the school or those that are managing the schools to be more accountable and be more results oriented. The ministry has had a couple of years now, they've had management courses for the top people, because I believe that's central. I've gone to Evansville in Essequibo. I had to brought Maid a Passad down here, and I think he said a thing to me. He says, "Don't give me a disciplined teacher. Don't give me a trained indisciplined teacher."
Amen.
He said, "I can deal with that. I can do a sort of remedial thing in the school to help that teacher that's not trained. But if you got an indisciplined teacher."
What do we mean by discipline?
What I mean, people come to work.
Are you advocating here, Dr. Jeffery, corporal punishment?
No, I'm talking
for
about
example?
teacher. You can't be
Yeah.
teachers.
No. You talk about discipline.
But no, I
What
spoke
do
about
they do?
disciplined teachers.
Was not dealing with
No,
discipline
not
of-
yet. Because if you have when you have disciplined teacher and disciplined management, I'm against corporal punishment. And this is one of the things somebody attacked me physically in front of the Ministry of Education about.
That's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
physically.
ironic.
I would go in my car and this woman just come up. Yeah, no, so as I said, I'm against corporal punishment in any case, but I'm talking about the teachers and what a good head can do to pull them together, to see that they have lesson plans, to see how they teach and things like that.
But again, are there sufficient incentives? Is there the motivation? Are the environmental factors there to encourage in the public sector schools?
Not that I'm aware of. I tell you this much, when we have teachers who come from the public system into ours, it's usually quite traumatic for them. The concept of coming for the required time, because we start,
Punctuality.
yes, our teachers are required to be there by 8:15. For many years, our school fell into the same rut as many others, where we were centered on the discipline of the child. And years ago, Mrs. Rodriguez said, you know, we don't hold our teachers to the same standard as we hold our students. If a child is going to be placed in detention after 3 latenesses per week, then a teacher should have some disciplinary action as well, and that is how it's done. I tell you, for example, I'm sure the entire nation is aware of our grade 6 results. By all standards, Mays has done well. But then we had a meeting recently, and the owner of the school said, our pass mark at Mays is 65%. If we check the pass rate of our grade 6 class, we have failed. And therefore, we have put several measures into place to ensure that all of our students get in, at least qualify for a senior secondary school. So you have to make your own standards, raise them, as Dr. Jeffery was saying, have plans for improvement of the school, and be committed to making those plans work.
I am very concerned on this apparent poor-rich divide in education. Do you share that concern?
It is a concern. As a teacher, as an educator, as a member of a school, I can tell you that for me, it's probably not as big a concern as for some others, because as a teacher, you find that the issues you face with students, whether rich or poor, tend to be quite similar. At Mays, we have a fair mix. I think a lot of persons assume that everybody at Mays or Nations or Marion is rich, and that is not
Well, at
true.
least they can pay the fees.
They
however.
can pay the fees, but
Which are not that low.
they're not that low, granted. But I don't think the general public is aware that many of our students are there on scholarships. And many of the parents make extreme sacrifices in order to reach that financial commitment. I think it has far more to do with the mindset. The so-called poorer students tend to take their position at Mays from a far different perspective. As a teacher, I can tell you that the so-called rich students come with their own series of challenges that my grandmother used to say, she doesn't know which is worse, the rich and idle or the poor and idle. And you have that sort of scenario where the children face similar issues. They may have family, most children these days have deep-seated family issues. The poorer child is probably more likely to be open about that, and so we may judge them more openly. The richer child, it will be hidden under so many layers. For you to access it and help that child is quite difficult.
Yeah. Of course, you're speaking from your own experiences,
Oh, my.
naturally. But I'm thinking of outside of the school. I'm thinking of the macro system.
But,
You
but-
would have seen it from
But that's
that side.
again, that's a historical concern anywhere you have private education. It has been the historic concern in places like England for the longest while, with those who can go to Eton and all them.
And in fact, now they're saying that it is getting worse because education being privatized.
Right, exactly. So it's always a concern. The question is what you do about it. What you have to try to do about it is make the public sector better.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's all you can do. You don't want to stop private schooling. Indeed, by going to private schools, some of the resources that normally would have been used for that can stay in the public system and used for others. What I'm saying to you is that you got to try and make the public system better. There is no other way unless you want to ban private education.
God forbid.
Well, but I don't know that it's as bad and apocalyptic that God should have to forbid it. I mean,
What is not as bad? Banning private education?
The top country in the world, Finland,
Yes.
has banned
Because
public education.
But their
But,
public education
eh,
system is
but that's because
phenomenal.
nobody was going.
No,
People wouldn't care.
because the public education, but it's now and they're number one in the world. The question is, however, And I think I'd be in a serious minority if I were to say
Ban private education. If that is what you're advocating,
I did not say that. But has the privatization of education in Guyana been for the overall good? And if you say yes, what yardstick are you using?
Well, I mean, I would say generally yes, because if you had many of these children in the private sector, in the public sector, I don't know that your grades would have gone up much more. What it has done is allow some of these students to be able to perform to their abilities. I would say that yes, from that standpoint, largely because they have resources and money. I think the focus has to be not on getting rid of private education, but essentially on trying to raise public education. You have to do that. And if it gets to a point where you have a very good public education, lots of people won't go pay the money to go private.
But aren't resources being diverted? Resources from parents, because the resources, when we talk about education, doesn't only mean what the government puts into it, but what the country, the teachers, the students, the educators, and the entire system.
Diverted from private people?
From the public, yes. That more resources are being put into the private sector.
By private people?
Yeah, but that's all right. We're talking about the nation. We're talking about the nation.
But yeah, but I think you're making a false a movement there. I mean, these are private people. They can go and drink with this money. They can go and buy another car with this money. They can do all sort of things. What they're saying, I want to put this money in my child. I have the capacity to do it. I'm doing that. It is you can't just look at your nation, because they could be doing worse things with their money than simply paying for their children to go to school.
Does having bright children in a class lift the standard of the whole class? And again, I'm getting at the effect. You take a child in a poor area, it really drops, and nobody wants to go to that school anymore. How does that affect our education system?
Well, at Mays, we wish we had the selection of students that go to Queen's College. And whenever I speak of Queen's College, I speak of it with a heavy heart, because I am a past student of Queen's College, and so that constant comparison between Mays and Queen's College is a difficult one for me. But the reality is that we don't get that. Invariably, we get the children who did not get the school that the parent wanted them to get, and so they choose to pay so that the child can wear a uniform that they can be proud of. The bottom line is, whether the child in the class is bright or not, you as a teacher and the institution as a whole has to put mechanisms in place to ensure that the best is brought out of that child, whatever the best is. If that child's best is not good enough for your school standard, you have to be strong enough to say, I don't think your child is in the right place. Even if you're paying $90,000 a term, I think that...
Is that
No, it's not. It's better for us in the long run if you remove your child than to have we're not an expensive daycare center, and that's one of the most difficult things to convince a parent of. You don't drop your child off here for us to take care of. Some of them bring them as early as 7 in the morning. They don't pick them up until 7 at night because they have paid their money. And so we have to bring value to the education service that we're offering daily.
I mean, I hope you understand that one term fees at Mays is nearly 50 times more than what the public sector spends all year.
We have to provide 50 times more the service. Parents expect that if the child is sick, they'll be called within a minute because they've paid for that.
And the public school don't have the choice of sending the parents away if the child isn't performing. Now, Mays must do that, because their outcomes would be abysmal if they don't start looking at who's coming into school.
Now, Henry, probably not you, but anyone who graduated from high school up to perhaps as late as the 90s, all of us would have fit it. I'm into the 60s.
Right.
8 subjects would have been considered at the top end of the scale.
Yeah.
Now 12 seem to be on the low end. What is your view on this trend, number of CXE subjects?
I think two days ago I'm listening to BBC, and there's a fella in India who was past 42 CXC type subject over 2 years. I mean, people have always been doing that. There is, with children has always been some
but-
parents. People are getting into Oxford. Was it John Stuart Mill? You know, can do Greek and all these things and get into Oxford at 12. People have always been doing that. And,
125 foreign languages.
and people will continue to
No,
do
no,
that.
no. But we're not talking about the extreme. I'm talking about the average now.
That's what I said to you. I think when we started, I said to you that in certain jurisdictions in the Caribbean, you can only do so many. So this is what school do. So if you want to do more than that, you got to go privately and get it done. And that helped the school perhaps to focus more their resources on what they can do and do what they can do best. So I think it's a way to think about it. It's not easy. A lot of people, you know, it's nice. I had those ideas to do that. But it's not just wake up in the morning and say, let's do that, and it happens.
I was going to ask if you had the idea to do 20 subjects for that.
No. Well, no, I
Ms.
wouldn't do
Ham, what's your school's policy?
Our school's policy
Yeah,
is
that's my
that we changed several years ago. We used to offer 20-odd subjects to our students. However, in the last few years, we have changed our timetable. We offer just 10 on the timetable, which we think is more than good enough. If a child wishes to do any additional subject, for example, our top student this year, she did 12, they have the option of doing it over a 2-year period or to do it outside of the timetable. The idea being that if you have the ability to do it, you have to match it with the commitment. The teacher is willing to stay back with you an hour after school. Do you really want to do this extra subject? If you really want to do it, we will provide the teacher. We will have all the facilities available for you. And right now, we don't normally have children doing more than 12 or 13.
There is a suggestion that the bar for passing the CXC is being lowered. Is there
Great.
any evidence
that's
or
something
credence to that?
Grade inflation. That's something in every country in the world. In England now, they say 90-something% of the children passing A-level. You heard this big shout, grade inflation. The A-level is not what it used to be. I mean, these things I don't know. I'll tell you this though, that in the 60s, we hear this thing about the great 60s. In the 60s, almost 5,000 pupils going for CXC type O-level type exam, only 5% pass, 250 something. Today, I've passed with more than 5 subjects, 5 subjects and more. Today, that number, when we did the analysis, that number was 20%, passed with 5 subjects and more. And yet we have the grade 60s.
What's your view?
In my opinion, there are many subjects on the list of offered CXC subjects that overlap. It is possible for a child to study for biology and be able to, with very little effort, extend their studies to HSB. EDPM,
HSB.
Human and Social Biology. The IT and the EDPM, along with office administration, there are great similarities across the subjects. HSB and social studies have a lot in common. So it is possible for a child to study for more subjects with not a proportionate increase in their studying. I also have noticed over the years that some of the CXC papers now have a little section that says hint. That certainly didn't exist in my time. So there are some changes.
Or in our time, Henry.
You know, and the children are very conscious of the curve of the grading. They'll tell you, I hope everybody does badly so that I'll get a 1. So we have to be very careful at our end. Children are children and they will function as children do. But from the administrative point, we have to be more careful.
The Constitution, you're right about that. Dr. Jeffery, is based on the principle that citizens have the right to free education from nursery to university. Is that a viable possibility?
That's an aspiration. I think that is in chapter 2 now.
Yes,
It's aspirational.
Yes. That's why I said it's based on the principle.
Yes.
It's not a fundamental.
I mean,
the
I think-
fundamental right is in relation to primary and secondary education.
Yeah, I go along with that. I mean, if you can do it, I don't think we can do it in any sensible way. We don't have to have the resources to do it. We need. We are spending. Something has gone haywire. I think it's when we said that we have rebalanced or rebased the economy. Because in my time, we used to spend something like 8% of GDP on education. Now it's 3.4. So I don't know that factor into that, but you are the numbers people. It has moved from 8% in my time in about 2005 to about 3.4% today. Now, you people can do the numbers. You are the people that run the numbers there. Yes, so I actually do believe that with what's being said there, and I believe it can happen.
Aspiration?
As an aspiration, but I believe we can do more. I think we need alternative pathways in the public sector more than in the private sector. Alternative pathways means that essentially you are putting people on pathways that have to do not only with academia, but with TVET, and TVET here I'm including music and all of that. Because not every child, I see we try to teach in the public system, we try to teach maths in abstraction. Everybody can't deal with it like that. But if you, a child like to do mechanics, and he start from low and he gets to like it, he would learn the maths as he go along to deal with the issues there. So to try to teach as an abstraction, it's difficult for some
Is that
people.
what's called vocational, technical vocational?
Yeah, TVET, technical vocational education, but but I'm saying you must have two pathways that you can still get to degree-like outcomes. So one pathway is your academic pathway, and the other pathway is your TVET pathway that can still take you to what would be degree equivalent. For instance, today you have the Caribbean vocational qualification, which takes you 4 levels, and it takes you there to a degree level at the 4th level.
We talk about students.
Yes.
Now, the challenge is to find good teachers. Are the private schools, in fact, getting the best and leaving the others?
I wish that was true. My job would be extremely easy if that was true. What we have done at Mays is try to come up with, again, creative ways of finding better teachers, and even when we don't find them, creating better teachers out of them. A lot of times that just means more vigilance. It means being prepared to part ways with teachers who appear to be good on their resume but turn out not to be. And of course, in return, you get accused of high turnover and so on, but I can live with that. What we've started to do is we advertise for teachers and they present glowing CVs. One of the things we've started to do is, while they're there, ask them a question, a simple question from a previous exam that our students just wrote, and you would be surprised. Teachers come hoping to just get the job and then prepare, and that's not good enough for us. In addition to that, we have them do mock classroom sessions, see how they interact with the children, get the children's feedback, and we find that those little things go a long way even before they enter your system.
And they would have come from the public sector teaching.
Mostly.
So, but aren't you saying then that you draw the very best from the public sector there?
No, the very best don't always apply.
Okay.
But from those who do apply, we try to get the best. And even when they are not the best, a lot of times a teacher is not up to the Mays standard when they are accepted. But then we put things into place.
You must, you obviously bring a business perspective. You are in fact running a business, and the business is education, rather than education. Have you done a comparison of salaries and compensation in in your and other private establishments compared with the public sector?
Well, that's very difficult for me to do because I don't have the sort of official access to public school salaries. I think Dr. Jeffery, you have
that's
that
public
information.
information. That's public information.
Yeah,
that's public
yeah,
information.
that's public
Surprisingly, you say
information.
that.
Yes.
It is public information.
Well,
I think-
it's public information in terms of what they should be, but then I'm sure that for any given teacher in the public system, there are variations that I
Not
wouldn't
really.
be.
They
No?
don't have the flexibility that you have in the private sector.
Okay. Well,
They're fixed on a grade, and that's it.
Really?
And an an increment of,
Yes.
I think, a 5-year. This
But
is
yes,
5%.
it's just 5%. Yeah. Well, I mean, what a trained teacher today maybe get what $50,000 a month, about that. That's a trained master in the public sector. Maybe you can tell us what your fee
No.
is.
You see, the thing with the public school
Look,
teachers,
you've done enough for your school, so go on and do some more.
the public school teacher, you must understand, has access to other forms of income that are very limited for a private school teacher. Our
yeah?
school is very clear that we are not proponents of the lessons giving. So,
I'm not defending
Well,
or criticizing
no,
it, it's because
no.
of the necessity
Yeah.
in the
yeah,
public
so
sector.
I'm saying I can't make a true judgment of a public school teacher's income. And in Mays, I can tell you that even within Mays, the issue of salaries is a very confidential one. You sign to that in your contract, so it's very difficult for me to make that.
So, I mean,
that
yeah, but
That's
obviously, I
Let me
mean,
hear your
I mean,
comment,
I'm not going to comment. I mean, you answer the question already. You ask it and you answer it. Effectively, they have the flexibility to do salaries. They want to attract the best teachers from wheresoever they are, and right now in Guyana, they will have to pay give better incentive to those people to leave the pensions as other thing that
But the
they
minister
might well.
had an article in a newspaper not so long ago saying that she's convinced that the salaries are on par.
Well,
She
I
can't
don't
be
know.
serious.
I don't know. I just
She
tell
can't
you.
be serious.
Perhaps, maybe she has the numbers. But all I'm saying to
Well,
you,
if the teachers from Mays don't know it, I don't know how the
well, right.
teachers
She,
knows it.
no, I don't. I think that they pay sufficient to get the best.
Which one, the private schools?
The private school, right? They try to get the best. I mean, even the best may not be the best for them because they might be indisciplined, they might be all sort of things that they're saying. But I think that goes without saying. And teacher salary has always been one of the problems in the education system generally.
Apart from salaries, the issue of status, and you have said, Ms. that you've come from a tradition of educators. Is it not correct to say that educators, teachers now enjoy, which is not the right word, very diminished status, probably inadequate salaries, and even student and teachers violence?
Absolutely.
What in relation to what? Because when you say diminished status, in relation to what and where?
In decades, perhaps decades gone by, it's obviously a gradual process. Do teachers, well, answer this question then, Dr. Jeffery. Do the teachers enjoy the same status now that they did, say, 30, 40 years ago?
No, but they were the only educated people almost in the community with the sanitary inspector and the postmaster. So it was a different story. I mean, these things change. Other people come into the society with more education, and the status change. Teachers around the world don't have great status, so to speak. Where do you find?
Some countries, no. Some countries
Yeah,
pay
the
their
one
teachers
no.
very, very well.
Pay is not the only thing to deal with status, please. But I mean, in terms of the other people in this society, because that's what you have to look against. I mean, teachers don't have no extraordinary status. Maybe in one place like Norway and so on, they have decent status, but most times people are leaving teaching and go to England. They said something like 20% of the people that graduate just don't go there. They go on elsewhere for similar reasons.
At one time, even as a stepping stone,
Yes.
Yeah.
people went into teaching.
Yeah.
Does that still happen? Is it to the same extent?
I don't believe so.
No, because it don't have to be a stepping stone. You get a 5 level and you go to university and get a
12.
degree.
Get
You got
12,
12 and you go to university and do a
20.
degree. It's not a stepping stone to anything. Yeah, better you go straight. If you cannot, in those days there was no UG. You teach a couple of years, you hustle, and you try to go abroad and so on. It's a different social context, and I think it's maybe a bit false to try to talk about status then and status now. I think in relation and status, in my view, doesn't only have to do with money, with salaries, so to speak. It's one element of it, but it's a lot of other things that are involved there.
What, as I said, you've come from a long line of educators. In talking about education, do you get the impression that there was even a belief or a perception that teachers and educators enjoy a better
or nurse girl?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes it is. Before the army, a lieutenant and
Yeah.
them took the scene away. I mean, it's part of the change. You know what?
But to be fair to the society at large, a lot of it has to do with the way in which teachers perceive themselves. I think as educators, there's much that we can do to improve the perception of us by the manner in which we carry ourselves.
In an article, and certainly, was it April this year, there was eight students had to be disciplined for causing a serious injury to a teacher. That their student and teachers' violence is in fact increasing, and some schools it's really an occupational hazard to be a teacher.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Again, I'm extremely happy in the private system that we have that much more flexibility in terms of dealing with issues
You
of
mean
conduct.
expulsion?
Oh yes, where necessary. Where necessary, without having to go through years of meeting with committees and councils and social workers, etc. We are happy that we have the responsibility along with the power to make some decisions where those things are concerned.
Is it fair that the private sector could so easily deal with that and throw those kids back either on society or on the public teaching system?
Throw them back from America.
No, I'm talking, Dr. Jeffrey, I'm talking about Guyana.
No, I'm saying to you, they are private school. When you go there, you go under certain circumstances. Certainly, the public schools don't have the opportunity to do just that. I mean, maybe you can transfer and all, but you're just transferring the problem. So there are but there are certain issues when you come to them, you have to go beyond the school and start looking at the society, the parenting, and people poor, they can't look after their children. Indeed, the violence starts in the home, the students become violent, all of this. I think one of the, in our time, parents, even the poorest parent, my parent, she was a domestic. But she had this great ambition that here, you and your sister gonna go to high school and she'll do whatsoever I gotta do.
I hope you didn't let her down.
Yeah, nearly did by going to metropoles, you know. But the point is that the society has become more complex and complicated. Violence seems to be more pervasive in it, and the result is that this thing filtered to the school. So it's not simply a school issue. It is a societal thing that the school now got to try and cope with. Indeed, teachers got to take on a more expansive role. Social welfare workers in any given area should be able to find children at risk and start talking to them and their parents long before they get to those stages. We just don't have that sort of framework on the ground. And the result is that by
the question, though, is not whether we have it, is whether we need it.
Of course we need it.
So that's another failure of our system.
Yeah, well, it is a failure. Why it's not there, let me put it. And everything can't be there given what you have. So I don't know. I mean, failure presupposes it could be there and it's not there. I mean, I'm saying it should be there there, and I don't know
But
if we
if
can
you
afford it.
recognize, and we're talking this broader issue, if you recognize that education is perhaps the single most important thing in the development of our countries, why shouldn't the country be putting more resources into education? Rather than, all these mega prestige projects, etc., that your government
My government
embraces.
Now, first of all, let me say this, and I said it to you before this whatsoever rebasing us. The government here used to be putting the same numbers in terms of GDP and government spending in education as any other country in the Caribbean, which is about 8%, outside of Cuba, which that's like a factory. 8% in terms of the GDP, 8 to 9%, and about 15% of government spending. It's into education. Now, I've always argued that, look, that's what, compare it, that's what they're doing, but 8% of $1 and 8% of $20 in Barbados is nothing. So maybe you need to make a greater effort. And yes, every effort should be made, especially if you have resources come from your value-added techs and all of that, rather than go in all sorts of fancy ways, as you pointed out. Maybe every effort should be made to try to put some of that in the education system, to put some in salaries, but more so to put some, as I said, in creating the kind of framework on the ground, I call it alternative pathways, that can see that all the children leaving your school system is qualified somehow or the other, in something or the other.
The private schools have largely not taken part in lots of national debates, unfortunately, on national issues. Would you venture a view as to whether this government is in fact putting enough money into education, given the importance of education to national development?
Again, I have no real concept. I am not as good an interpreter of the numbers as you are as to what is available, but being a firm part of the academic society here in Guyana, we always want more. There's so much more to want. There's so much more that we need. I would continuously beg that more be invested. That is a position I would gladly make.
I was speaking with the head yesterday, and the head said, look, the age at which people leave school, you get CXC at 15. Compare that with lots of other countries. You don't get out of high school until you're 18, of course, at slightly different grade levels. Is that an issue we need to be looking at?
I believe so.
Well, I don't know. If you go on to do A levels here, you don't leave till 18.
2 years.
Yeah, so I mean, so I don't know.
Should A levels? Well, that begs the question, then perhaps should A levels become more the norm now in our education system?
I would hope it does.
Well, I am not certain. Well, it depends on what you.
So,
mean.
are you suggesting that people at 15 they are?
Now, 50, 60, and 59 whatsoever. But what I'm saying, the O levels. This is a big debate. This is not just a simple question of A level or O level. This got a tremendous debate over whether or not you should doing first year at the university or doing for when you go to the university, you start in third. Do a 3-year course rather than a 4-year course, because the first year at the university is essentially A levels. So there's a big debate about this, whether or not the English system that essentially says you got to get to A level, and it's 3 years, which would save you 1 year resources, and you do that in school by your the A level in school by your parent and all of that. So you come there at 18, and by 21 you got your degree in 3 years, and you take a walk. Or if you go to America, and you can go in at 17 and so on, with essentially O level, but it's 4 years. So this is a long debate. It's not just a simple matter.
But is a child 15, 16? The average, we're talking average now, really ready for the workforce?
But it's not work. It's not work. Well, yeah.
Because lots of them
17
don't go on to university.
Yes,
So
yeah.
what happens at that point?
No, it depends on why not. I mean, I don't see 16 why you can't go and work if you have your 5.0 level and all of that lot.
5.0 levels of that diminished qualification.
No, I don't know about diminished qualification.
Well, you
you are
said
the
it when
one
you call
keep
it
saying
inflation,
grade
grade
inflation. That's
It's-
yours. I'm saying it's
your
it's another argument about. I don't know that you have grade inflation. You seem
But
to
you
want
see,
to suggest that.
You,
I'm not claiming that.
Where do you stand on this 15, 16?
Generally, I don't think our average 15 and 16-year-olds are ready for the workforce or for university. I was fortunate enough to have the sixth form experience, and it's one that I highly recommend.
This was at Queen's?
Yes.
Yes.
I highly recommend to any student who qualifies. Not everyone will have the aptitude to continue that sort of program. And it's something we definitely need to look at. Maize is, of course, feverishly working towards developing its sixth form program. But again, it comes to the question of qualified teachers. We found that over the years it's been quite difficult to find CAPE teachers.
Where does one begin to look for solutions? Is it at the bottom, the nursery? Is it at the middle, somewhere in secondary schools? Is it at the top, the University of Guyana? Or is it somewhere else at policy level? And none of those.
Solutions to what?
To the education challenges, crisis, however
Which
we want to.
challenge? Are these things you
That
can't
we-
just set? These
that
challenges
we've
are
been-
many.
Yes, that we've been talking about.
Oh, O-level passes, sexy
The
passes, and
the
things.
failure rates and all.
Right. The school, in my view, school management. School management is a force.
You don't think
and foremost.
policy is
No,
a
no,
big
but
an
you
issue?
must have policy. I mean, I thought we were talking about concrete things.
Yeah.
Of course, you must have a vision, first of all. You must know where you are, develop a vision about it and how you're going to get out of it, get the resources and all of that to do it. And then we get to this, and I'll say school management.
So you're not linking it at, say, any particular level, nursery, primary,
No,
secondary.
all levels. School management drives the school. School management has. I think I've been there. I looked at this thing, and every time you use one country, this is another thing you should look at. Given what Guyana spends, it does quite well. You know, Miss Applewhite used to be Deputy Secretary General at CARICOM.
Yes.
One education day, she was invited to speak on Education Month. And she said Guyana has the most effective education system in the world. And even I was a bit taken back. I didn't understand what she was saying. She was saying, given what you spend, your outcomes are amazing. Of course. And I went and I checked to see which other
Yeah,
country.
but the thing is, look what it has in terms of an economy, in terms of a political culture, in terms of everything else.
Yes, but
So if you spend nothing, using that argument, the less you spend, the better you can be.
no. What it says at any level of spending, you can be
Have some amount.
some amount of optimality. That's what it says.
Where would you say where would you look for solutions? At what level?
If we had to assign a level, I think for me, it's logical to start at the very beginning. The playgroup. At Maize, we have that opportunity of the playgroup feeding the nursery, likewise nursery to primary, primary to secondary. And in our observations, the students who we have had control over from the time they could walk and before they could talk are generally the students who give us the best results. We are able to mold their academic culture. We are able to work with them at each level. For example, recently we have integrated the ABECA system into our program, something that I'm sure doesn't exist in the public school. We have that option. And we have found that our students are reading earlier, they're doing math quicker. So if we can have the continuity of that, then of course we expect to see better results by the CSEC level.
Ms. Onya Sam, Director of the Secondary Division of Maize School, and Dr. Henry Jeffery, former Minister of Education, friend of Plain Talk. Thank you very much for appearing on Plain Talk. I think you did a great job for your school, and you do for your policies.
Thank you.
Operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. See you next week.